these two movies had a lot in common. They're both Disney blockbusters that were announced to, and also came out to, a good amount of fanfare. Both had some degree of nostalgia to cash in on, and also to live up to. And both movies share the same general plotline. A team of unlikely people have to come together to create a team whose total must be greater than the sum of its parts in order to defeat overwhelming odds. That said, I think Miracle is better. Miracle is one of my favorite movies as a kid, and still is one of my favorite movies now. And every viewing I've had has really confirmed that. It's been a solid movie that's never gone up, down, or sideways in terms of how it comes off each time you watch it. It accomplishes everything it's set out to do, and it never becomes cheesy or reminds you that you're watching a relic of 2003. It'd be just as solid of a movie if it came out today as it did when it came out in 2003. Avengers, on the other hand, while far from a bad movie, tends to sit just above mediocre. Every viewing tends to give you a new feeling from it, and while it does what it needs to do within the scope of the franchise, it does have more than a few cringe moments within it.
I said...
And while the third act is plenty good, it doesn't really hold up to the other three Avengers movies in my mind, and it certainly doesn't hold up to this.
Second left in the game. Do you believe in miracles? Yes!
So while both of these movies bring a team together to defeat overwhelming odds, there's one thing that Miracle does exceptionally well that Avengers does unremarkably: provide meaning. So let's take a look at how Miracle does this and how Avengers could improve to make its third act a lot more memorable. I'm Trevor Pelka, and Miracle is one of my favorite movies. The goal of both of these movies is about the same. While they want you to enjoy the runtime and feel a little bit nostalgic and excited, how well you remember the movie will mainly be based on how much you enjoy the third act. For Miracle, that's when the US hockey team plays the Soviets in the medal round, and for Avengers, it's when the Avengers defend New York City from an alien attack. If you're going to walk out of the theater and remember these movies fondly, it will likely be because the third act wowed you and gave you that cathartic movie-going experience you were looking for. I think Miracle has one of the best third act payouts of any movie that I can think of, while Avengers I find forgettable. The thing is, you can't say it's because it's from a different genre. If there's any movie that can top the third act payout of Miracle, it's Avengers Endgame. Let's take a look at some of the features that went into it. Number 1, narrative threads. Narrative threads make up the fabric of stories. When you think of movies, we don't think so much of the character arcs as we do about moments. Moments that satisfy you, or moments that wow you as an audience member. Narrative threads aren't an A plot, B plot, or C plot. They're little conversations or little moments that are visited at the beginning of the story, in the middle of the story, and once at the end of the story to resolve it. They're little witty remarks that inform the audience of the dynamic between the characters, but when done right, they carry a lot of weight to them because they reveal things about the characters' insecurities, their motivations, and what they're struggling with in the duration of the movie. And we get to see how they're overcome throughout the course of the screenplay.
What? So that's what this is about? Because I didn't take your test? Fine, you want me to take your test? I'll take your test. Is that what you want?
No. I want to see that kid in the net who wouldn't take the test.
When Eric Guggenheim sat down to write the script of Miracle, he started from his source material, the actual hockey game between the Soviets and the United States in 1980, and he wrote his script around that. He wanted the script to be accurate to the game itself, but also wanted us to have an emotional investment in what happened during it, so that it doesn't seem arbitrary. So, the narrative threads in the movie Miracle revolve around the actual events in the hockey game between the US and the Soviets. Take this moment. Jack O'Callahan delivers a huge hit that leads to a goal to end the first period. Well, it showed us that same character, O'Callahan, delivering a massive hit on his teammate, Rob McClanahan, at the beginning of the movie to tell us that while O'Callahan may have a talent for huge hits, he's using it against the fabric of the team. The story is that McClanahan delivered a cheap shot against O'Callahan in a national championship game years earlier, and O'Callahan has been carrying around a vendetta ever since then. The script shows us O'Callahan being selfish earlier in the script, so that we can see him using it for good later in the script. Similarly, the script has taken time to show us that while Mike Eruzione is the heart and soul of the team and the team's captain, it is having a hard time putting the puck in the back of the net. He hasn't been making his shots in practice, and while he's been the most beloved member of the team, Coach Herb Brooks considers cutting him because he can't make his shots. Well, why does this matter? It matters because Eruzione is the player who made the shot that gave the US the lead in the actual game against the Soviets. The script gave us this narrative thread so that we would care about it when it pays it off in the third act. Where the script is genius and goes to the next level, I think, is in the final diegetic 10 minutes of the hockey game. The US wins the game by scoring a goal to go up 4-3 with 10 minutes left. They kept the lead and they won the game. Well, in sports movies, we tend to make the final game as dramatic as possible. We show buzzer beaters, Hail Marys, walk-off home runs, anything we can to make it as cathartic as possible. What happened in real life? The US team outskated the Soviets for the last 10 minutes and ran out the clock. Well, that's certainly boring in comparison to a last-second goal or to a shootout or to a penalty shot or something like that. But yet, Eric Guggenheim and Gavin O'Connor made the last 10 minutes of the game the most exciting of the movie. How? Narrative threads. We spend huge portions of the screenplay dedicated to the team conditioning together, with Herb Brooks nearly abusing them and how much he works them. Conditioning isn't this arbitrary beat within this movie. It's how Herb Brooks gets them to bond as a team. We empathize with the fact that they were overworked and overconditioned, which made it that much more satisfying when the US outskates the Soviet team, and we see that what they'd been working at was exactly what they needed in order to accomplish their goal. Compare that to Avengers. We have a handful of narrative threads that come up in the final act.
I'm always angry.
And these moments are rewarded, but the reality is that A, there aren't that many of them, and B, we don't understand the characters and their conflict with each other enough. Thor has no real plotline in this movie, so his action scenes are next to meaningless. Captain America's conflicts are only with Tony Stark, and frankly he's being a little rude to a guy that he just met.
I've seen the footage. The only thing you really fight for is yourself.
The point is that creating meaning is something that later Avengers movies become the best at. But in their first try, there's no real meaning to the action in the third act of this movie, which makes it more or less forgettable. Miracle, on the other hand, provides nearly endless meaning to every bit of action that we see during the game against the Soviets. Lesson number 2. Important stakes. Stakes are another area where I think Miracle blows Avengers out of the water. And here's what's weird about it. Conventional wisdom says that if you want your audience to buy into your stakes, you need higher stakes. But these movies prove that that's not really true. The stakes of Avengers are that if they don't come together as a team, the government will nuke the city of New York and 8 million people will die. The stakes of Miracle are that if they lose to the Soviets, their next game will be competing for a bronze medal instead of a silver or gold medal, even though the team has already outperformed their expectations at the Olympics. But that's not how these movies feel at all. Why? Well, because we don't know the people of New York in the Avengers. Now, there's another part of this where we know that they're not going to nuke New York in the Avengers. But say that we didn't know that. Say that this was that type of movie. When we see the citizens, they're cartoonish. They're undistinguishable. We spend absolutely no time with any of the citizens in this movie, so we're not really worried about what happens to New York. Now, take Miracle. I care deeply that the United States beats the Soviets. Why? Because in 1960, when Herb Brooks was on the Olympic team right before the game started, Brooks was cut from the team and his team won the gold medal. And the Soviets have won the gold medal every year since then. That's why our protagonist Herb Brooks is hell-bent on beating the Soviets and winning the gold medal. What are the stakes for our protagonist Herb Brooks and the US Olympic hockey team? Crushed dreams. And for Herb Brooks, a single shot at redeeming those crushed dreams. Our protagonist has had his dreams crushed before, and if he blows this opportunity, we know he'll likely never get another shot to redeem them. The actual concept behind the stakes in these movies is about emotional relativity. Emotions carry far more weight when they're closer to your own experience. It's why it matters way more to you if your best friend had a bad breakup than it does if hundreds were killed in a natural disaster in a faraway country. It's because emotions are relative. We have to be able to relate them to something. And the more we see ourselves in the characters, the more heartbroken we'll be at their failures, and the more ecstatic we'll be at their victories. When people sit down to write their script, so often we believe that we need high stakes in order for the audience to be invested. But what this actually gets us into is basically the superhero syndrome with every script, where every problem is a potential world-ending catastrophe. As an audience, we're numb to it. If the world of your story is at risk of ending, but we don't care about the narrative world you've built, the stakes themselves won't gauge our interest. What instead you should be searching for is our emotional relativity to the characters and the world. What are we to relate to? Who are we to see ourselves on screen as? If it's a fictitious portrayal of a New York City metropolis that we don't actually know, we won't be invested. But in the case of Miracle, for Coach Herb Brooks and for the players that we follow, the stakes are crushed dreams. If Herb can't beat the Soviets, if the players can't beat the Soviets, they fell short of their dreams, and they'll have to redefine their dreams in the future because they'll never get another shot at a gold medal. So as an audience member, I have dreams, and I don't want them to be crushed. Therefore, I see myself in Herb and the players in this movie. These movies have very similar structures, with only a 7-minute difference in runtime. They're both about someone who compiles a team and brings them together to overcome overwhelming odds. They both have an extended final battle, either fighting a massive alien army or beating the Russians in a hockey game, but one movie provides far more meaning for its audience. I think Miracle is a much better movie because it leaned into its third act. I think as you go back through it, you can see that the writing of Miracle started with the third act and figuring out what it had to do to make it as satisfying as possible, to give us the highest possible emotional payout as an audience. There are later Marvel and Avengers movies that do a much better job of this, but that's definitely what's missing in the first one that could have taken this from a solid, watchable movie to a great one, like we remember Infinity War and Endgame. It's not that Avengers is bad, but rather that it left a lot on the table, and with more meaningful work done in the first and second acts, it could have made the movie a lot more memorable and a lot more cathartic in the end. Miracle, on the other hand, does just about everything it can with its runtime. It invests you in a variety of relationships, it hooks you with its stakes, it sells you on how good and how scary the Soviets are, and all of this makes it that much more satisfying when the team does everything that it needs to beat the Soviets and make for one of the most memorable sports moments of the century and a movie that stands the test of time. I'm Shep Papelka, and Miracle is one of my favorite movies.